Past Sins. Chapter 3. School Days and Memories. Nick stood close to Twilight's front leg as she looked ahead. Before the pair was a building, painted in rich, welcoming red colors, and surrounded by a lush green yard. The building was decorated with festive hearts. Even the weather vane on top of the bell tower featured a heart, looking almost like Cupid's arrow. A playground was visible out behind the building, while in front was a flagpole and a head sculpture of a pony wearing a square flat-topped hat with a tassel. A welcoming sight to most young ponies in the community, and a place of fond memories to many of Ponyville's residents. A place of learning, where ponies studied for a bright future and made good friends. The Ponyville Elementary Schoolhouse. The mulberry-colored earth pony cheerily granted the gift of knowledge to her students. It was a place that utterly terrified Nix. "Do I really have to go?" the black-coated filly asked, trying her best to hide behind Twilight's leg. "Yes," Twilight replied. "For how long?" "You're signed up for the morning class, so you'll be done around lunchtime. I'll come back to pick you up then." "But I didn't have to go to school before. Why do I have to go now?" "It's important for you to get a good education," Twilight replied, though it wasn't the whole truth. Yes, she felt it was important for Nix to go to school, but it was also part of her disguise. If she was going to school, it would be easier for ponies to believe that she was just an average unicorn filly and Twilight's cousin. Nix was also becoming just a little too clingy at the library. She had a thirst for knowledge that was almost unquenchable, and Twilight hadn't been able to get much research done into the cult's spell. She found Nix's curiosity wonderful and wanted to encourage it, but she needed to be able to get her own studies done as well, and maybe have a few hours to herself. "Can't I just stay at the library with you?" Nix pleaded. "The whole point of school is to learn new things," Twilight replied. "You've been learning everything you can from me and Rarity, and you've been having a lot of fun. Now you're just going to learn from Cheerily instead, and actually be in a class with other fillies and colts." "But I know you and your friends, and I don't know Cheerily. What if she's mean?" Twilight chuckled a bit at Nix's fear. "Don't worry. Cheerily's very nice. Just pay attention in class and remember to follow the rules. That means both Cheerily's rules and my rules, which are: I can't take off my vest, I can't take off my glasses, I can't tell any pony about my wings or that I'm an alicorn, and I should try not to use my magic unless I'm writing something down." "And try to make some friends," Twilight added, rubbing a hoof against the little filly's head in a playful nuggie. Nix giggled, escaping from Twilight's hoof before looking up at the unicorn, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. "Are friends really that important?" "Trust me, nothing is more important than having good friends," Twilight said, taking a step forward as the school bell began to ring. "Now come on. If we keep standing here, you're going to be late." "Good morning, class," Cheerily said in a sing-song voice as she stood at the front of the room. "Good morning, Cheerily," the class echoed back, some honestly meaning it while others were just saying it because it's what the teacher expected. "Now, before we get started, I have a small announcement. We have a new student joining us today. Her name is Nix," Cheerily said, motioning to the black-coated filly standing next to her. "And I expect you all to welcome her as you would any new student." "Yes, Cheerily," the class chimed back. The mulberry teacher gave a pleased nod before turning to look at Nix. "Good. Now go ahead and find a seat. You can take any open desk you like." Nix nodded gently before she looked out at across at the dozen desks. The schoolhouse had only 9 desks the day before, but in preparation for having a new student, Cheerily had brought in another 3 desks out from storage. The room was now laid out with 4 columns of 3 desks each. The rest of the class was sitting to one side of the room, leaving an entire column of empty desks to the left of the students. Nix looked at each seat. Twilight had told her to sit as close to the front as possible, but at the same time, Nix didn't feel brave enough to sit in the very front. At least not on the first day. With only 3 rows of desks to choose from, that only left one desk that really worked. Nix walked to the middle desk, setting down the saddlebags Twilight had packed for her that morning before taking a seat. Directly next to her was an earth pony, with a grayish magenta coat, and a mane that was a mixture of white and violet. Nix couldn't help but notice she was wearing a tiara very similar to the tiara she had for a cutie mark. It was only then that Nix realized that the pony she was staring at was staring back, and not in a good way. The tiara-wearing pony wore an expression of annoyance, as if Nix's very presence offended her. Nix shrank away from the other filly, not sure what to do. But then she remembered what Twilight told her. Gathering what courage she could, Nix gave a very sheepish smile and gently waved her hoof. But the tiara-wearing pony just humphed and turned her head away, lifting her nose a little. It was an action that made Nix slump down in her seat, turning her attention to the front of the room, where Cheerily was writing something on the board. School was not going to be fun at all. School was amazing! Nix could only smile, horns shimmering as she took notes feverishly. Cheerily had started the day's lesson with some history, talking about the founding of Ponyville by Earth Ponies and why the town honored some of the traditions that they did, focusing on the town's seasonal traditions. Now, are there any questions before we go to recess? Cheerily asked, not expecting to see a single hoof in the air since her students were always more interested in taking their recess. Still, the teacher couldn't help but smile when she saw a particular black hoof in the air, as she had seen raised several times before, the sign of an eager student. Yes, Nix, what's your question? How was winter wrap-up done before there were Pegasus ponies in Ponyville? That is a very good question, Nix, the teacher replied, pleased with her inquisitiveness. While it is tradition that magic isn't used to clean up winter, few ponies realized that back when the tradition started, there weren't Pegasi around. So how did they clean up the clouds and get the birds back? Well, if you don't mind getting to recess a little later than usual, I can tell you that originally the Earth Ponies in town. And Cheerily was off, going much deeper into her lecture. Nix was happy, already jotting down fresh notes. Her note-taking, however, was interrupted as Nix felt something hit the side of her head. Looking down at the floor, she saw it was a piece of paper, and upon looking up, she saw a number of her classmates were glaring at her fairly coldly for delaying recess. Nix sank into her desk, whimpering a little as she wondered what she had done wrong. She had just asked a question. She was just curious. Boy, am I glad to get outside, Apple Bloom said about 15 minutes later when Cheerily had finished talking about how Earth Ponies cleared the clouds. I'm just glad Cheerily didn't cancel recess because that question that new filly asked. But it was pretty cool hearing how the Earth Ponies were able to clear the skies and bring back the southern birds before there were Pegasi in the town, Twist argued as she and Apple Bloom walked down the outside steps of the schoolhouse, heading into the playground area. Yeah, it was kinda cool, but I'd still rather have recess. So, what do you want to do? You want to take turns on the swing? Twist asked, pointing at the swing in question. Sure, Apple Bloom replied as the pair jogged. Twist arrived first, jumping on the wooden swing as she began to put her weight into swinging. Apple Bloom stood back, watching as her friend swung higher and higher into the air. It wasn't the highest the farm filly had seen some pony reach on the swing, but respectable. Hey! Twist called as she reached the top of her forward swing. What is it? I think Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara are talking to the new filly, Twist said, saying a few bits of her sentence each time she swung by Apple Bloom. The farm filly turned her head, seeing that the two school bullies had caught the new filly just as she came outside for recess. The three of them were talking on the schoolhouse steps. "What do you think they're talking about?" "Nothing good if I know those two," Apple Bloom said, before turning in that direction. "Twist, you stay here a sec. I'll be right back." "Okay," Twist called, continuing to swing, but watching as her yellow earth pony friend made her way across the playground. Thankfully, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had their backs to the rest of the playground, so they couldn't see Apple Bloom approaching. This allowed the yellow filly to listen in and hear what the two bullies were saying. "So, we don't appreciate nerds like you making us almost miss recess," Diamond Tiara said, pointing an accusing hoof. "That class is already so boring without you asking a bunch of questions," Silver Spoon added. "We get enough of that from Twist. But at least Twist is bearable. That, and she doesn't have an ugly coat like yours." Nyx cringed, lowering her head as her ears flattened, tears forming in her eyes. "Ugly?" as she barely sniffled out. The two earth ponies looked at each other with malicious smirks before they turned their attention back to Nyx. "Yeah, ugly. The absolute worst color. I would just die if I had a black coat." Silver Spoon nodded her head in agreement, scrunching up her nose in disgust. "Me too. Not only is black so ugly, but it's creepy too. Only things like spiders, bats, and ticks are supposed to be black, not ponies. It just isn't natural." "She probably actually likes bugs. Why, I bet she's covered in ticks this very moment." "Ew," Silver Spoon replied, sticking out her tongue before the two fillies began to chant evilly together. "Nyx has ticks. Nyx has ticks. Nyx has ticks." I do not," Nyx whimpered, trying to defend herself, but lacking the courage or conviction needed to get the bullies to stop. Tears were already flowing from her eyes, only fueling the sadistic mood of the two-class bullies. "Aw, what's the matter?" Diamond Tiara mocked with fake sympathy. "Are you going to cry like a little fool?" "I bet she is. She's been teary-eyed the whole time we've been talking to her. You are such a crybaby." Nyx couldn't stand it anymore. She collapsed on the ground and proceeded to wail, making the two earth ponies laugh, not noticing a yellow filly sneaking behind them. "So, is crying supposed to be your super special talent or something?" Diamond Tiara taunted. "Nah, she doesn't even have a cutie mark," Silver Spoon noted, pointing to Nyx's blank flanks. "Wow, I so didn't notice that before," laughed Diamond Tiara. "So she's a nerd, a creep, a crybaby, and a blank flank. She's the biggest loser in the whole school." "More like the biggest loser in Ponyville," Silver Spoon corrected, making Nyx only cry harder. The two bullies continued to laugh until Diamond Tiara was suddenly shoved to the ground, namesake Tiara falling off her head and into the dirt. "Oh my gosh, Tiara!" Silver Spoon exclaimed, eyes darting until she saw furious Apple Bloom standing just a few feet away. Silver Spoon quickly connected the dots and glared at the yellow farm filly.
Like, you're going to be in so much trouble now. My tiara!
Diamond Tiara cried out, turning and glaring daggers at Apple Bloom.
You got dirt on my tiara. I'm telling Cheerily.
Fine, Apple Bloom challenged. If you do that, then I'll tell her that you were being mean.
Oh, what? And you think she'll believe you?
Diamond Tiara said, pointing her hoof at Apple Bloom.
Nix is crying, and Twist is watching the whole thing. Is not.
Diamond Tiara protested. Apple Bloom, however, just smirked and pointed out a hoof behind her, where Twist, while still on the swings, was watching the whole thing. Silver Spoon grabbed Diamond Tiara's tiara, doing her best to wipe off the treasured crown.
Come on, Diamond Tiara. This is like not worth our time getting in trouble for. Fine. You win this round, blank flank. Have fun with your new friend and all of her ticks.
Diamond Tiara sneered before turning away.
Let's get out of here, Silver Spoon.
Apple Bloom watched the pair retreat before huffing and scraping her hoof on the ground.
Someday I'd like to buck some sense into those two just like my big sister would. She never got teased in school. But then again, she got in trouble for fighting.
Apple Bloom grumbled before turning around.
You okay?
Nix nodded, still crying, but beginning to calm down. She carefully removed her glasses to rub the tears from her eyes. Nix kept her eyes closed the entire time her glasses were off, not wanting to get teased about her strange eyes, and did not open her eyes again until the glasses were back where they belonged, perched on the filly's nose.
Why are those two so mean?
Sniveled Nix.
Personally, I think it's their special talents, and that they should have bully cutie marks. But I guess it's kind of like having a special talent for arguing. There just isn't a cutie mark that really makes sense for being a bully. I'm Apple Bloom, by the way.
The yellow filly chirped as she put out a hoof. The disguised alicorn looked at the hoof for a bit before shakily offering up her own in a rather weak hoof shake.
I'm Nix. Well, howdy, Twilight. What brings you around these parts?
Applejack greeted, trotting up to the purple unicorn.
Oh, hey, Applejack.
I'm just on my way to the schoolhouse, Twilight replied as the farm mare started to walk with her.
Well, that's just where I'm heading. I'm picking up Apple Bloom from school today. Need your help running some errands in town. What about yourself?
I'm picking up Nix.
Nix? That cousin of yours?
Applejack asked, surprised.
Since when did that little filly start going to school? Today was her first day, actually. First day of school is never easy, especially when you just moved to a new place.
Yeah, I remember the first day I transferred from my old school to Celestia School for Gifted Unicorns, Twilight reminisced.
It was scary, but I really didn't have to deal with a lot of other students, being Celestia's private pupil and all. Still, doesn't this mean Apple Bloom and Nix are in class together?
I reckon it does. You think they've met? Applejack asked as the pair rounded a bend in the path, the school coming into view. Twilight smiled, just taking notice of a couple of fillies playing just outside the schoolhouse. I'd say they've more than just met. Applejack followed Twilight's eyes, and the pair stopped and watched from a distance as Apple Bloom playfully chased Nix around. Oh. The pair of young mares watched the fillies play for a few moments before resuming their approach. Applejack called out to her little sister, causing both Apple Bloom and Nix to run in their direction.
Hey, Apple Bloom, how was school today?
Applejack asked once the fillies were within earshot.
It was really fun, and I made a new friend.
Is this her?
Yep, Applejack. This is Nix. Nix, this is my big sister, Applejack.
the yellow filly said, proudly introducing her sister.
Wait, your big sister's Applejack?
Nix asked, glancing with a confused expression at Apple Bloom.
You already know my big sister?
Apple Bloom asked in return, reflecting Nix's confusion on her own face.
She should,
the Orange Farm pony interrupted. Twilight brought Nix around to see me and all our other friends.
Why would she do that?
Apple Bloom asked, cocking her head to one side.
Because Nix is my cousin, and she's staying with me at the library,
Twilight answered with her simple lie.
Whoa, that's cool,
Apple Bloom said excitedly.
Did you know Twilight once beat an Ursa Minor all by herself?
Nix's eyes went wide, looking at the purple unicorn with awe and admiration.
You did? Well, yes, but I wouldn't really call what I did beating it,
Twilight clarified modestly.
The Ursa Minor was just cranky from being woken up, so I gave it some milk and rocked it to sleep. But it was still really cool,
Apple Bloom offered.
So, did anything else happen at school today?
Twilight asked, trying to steer the conversation away from her defeat of the Ursa Minor.
Well, some of the other fillies in class were mean to me. Oh, and Cheerily wanted me to give you something,
Nix said, horn glowing as her saddlebags clicked open. A note floated into the air, passing from Nix's magic to Twilight's as the unicorn began to read.
What does it say? Did Nix do something bad?
Apple Bloom asked, her only experience with teacher's notes being when she had misbehaved at school.
No, it's just Cheerily asking me to make sure Nix knows about some subjects, since she's starting partway through the school year.
Applejack whistled, reading the note over Twilight's shoulder.
That ain't just some subjects, Twi. That's a whole lot of book learning Nix has to catch up on. Yes, but with my help, I'm sure we'll get through it really quickly,
Twilight said confidently as she rolled up the note and put it in Nix's saddlebags. We'll of course start right away.
We could probably get through basic mathematics this afternoon if we hit it really hard.
Aww, Apple Bloom muttered in disappointment.
What's the matter, Sugar Cube? I wanted to ask Nix if she could join the Cutie Mark Crusaders. I'm meeting with Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle after they get out from the afternoon class, so we can try and find our cutie marks. And Nix doesn't have hers either. Well, them two friends of yours don't get out of class until afternoon, and you and I got errands to run. So how about you let Nix go get some learning done with Twilight, and then you and your friends can go find her at the library later.
Applejack glanced over to her unicorn friend.
That is, if it's okay with Twilight.
Before the unicorn could even answer, both Apple Bloom and Nix were giving her the biggest, most pleading puppy dog eyes and begging smiles they could muster. It was enough to make Twilight giggle, nodding her head and drawing a pair of cheers from the two young fillies. Diamond Tiara groaned as she dropped her face into her open book. She glared coldly at the letters on the page, even though she'd rather be setting her stare on a certain black filly. Nix had just asked another question right before recess, and now Cheerily was continuing to lecture past the time they were supposed to go outside. Thankfully, the answer to Nix's question was short, and the fillies and colts of the school were soon free to run and play outside. Nix rushed out with Apple Bloom and Twist, the three running off to play on a bit of playground equipment. Diamond Tiara watched the black filly from across the playground with a glare, waiting for Silver Spoon to get outside.
Hey there, Diamond Tiara. How boring was that lesson? Totally boring. And Nix just couldn't keep her mouth shut, and she had to ask another one of her dumb questions. Seriously, I don't know what's wrong with her. It's like she actually likes school. A total egghead, Silver Spoon agreed. She's been like this since she started class 2 weeks ago. I don't know why she keeps doing it. Like every pony else hates her. No, like every pony else hates it. Her only friends are those 3 blank flanks and that other nerd, Twist. Somebody needs to teach her a lesson about being so nerdy. Yeah, hey, wanna put gum on her chair? No, that won't do it. It might make her cry, but that'll be it. If we're going to prank her, it needs to be a prank that teaches her not to be so curious, Diamond Tiara said, shifting her gaze away from the black filly and to the forest trees in the distance. Diamond Tiara began grinning devilishly. Oh, that is too perfect. What is it? Silver Spoon asked. Diamond Tiara motioned for Silver Spoon to get in close before she started whispering in her friend's ear. Soon Silver Spoon wore a similar grin to Diamond Tiara's, nodding her head in approval. Oh, Diamond Tiara, that'll teach her. Bump, bump, sugar lump, rump, the pair said in unison, doing their strange special hoof shake, before they laughed and began to stroll off to set their plans in motion. Knock, knock, knock. Coming, Twilight announced, strolling towards the door. She and Nix were in the middle of the filly's extra afternoon lessons, where she and Twilight worked to catch Nix up with the rest of her class. Nix was working on some math problems Twilight had written out for her when the unicorn went to answer the door. Nix? Twilight called from the door. Yeah? There are a couple of friends of yours from school out here. You want to take a break and go play with them? Nix was at the door in a flash, expecting Apple Bloom or Twist. But her smile turned to a frown when she saw Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon standing there. Hey, Nix. We were just going to Sugar Cube Corner to get a snack. You want to come with? Diamond Tiara offered, putting on a smile. I really shouldn't. I've got a lot of studying to do. Oh, nonsense, Twilight said, using a leg to push Nix out the door. She then fetched the black filly's saddlebags and put a few bits into the right bag. Go have a break with your friends. Oh, and can you bring me back a sugar cookie? Pinkie Pie was bragging about how the sugar cookies she made this morning are the best ever, and I was hoping to try one. But, Nix stammered, the unicorn not quite picking up on Nix's lack of excitement. Before she knew it, she was already outside, with Twilight expecting her to buy snacks for both herself and the little fillies. Nix lowered her head and looked at the 2 fillies in fear, afraid of what other mean things they would say to try to emotionally wound her. Instead, the 2 continued to smile, and they were strangely welcoming smiles. So, Silver Spoon and I just wanted to apologize for being so mean. You do? Nix asked as she raised her head, utterly surprised to hear those words. It was the last thing she expected them to say. Yeah, like, we thought about what we did, and we're so sorry we did it. It's not easy being the new kid in town, and it was wrong of us to be mean to you like that. That's okay. I forgive you, Nix said with a weak smile, still anxious about being around the 2 bullies. Still, you 2 said a lot of mean things. We know, and we feel really bad, but like, we gotta make sure that the new ponies in town are cool, Silver Spoon said,
as if judging a pony's coolness was their job.
So, that was all a test? Nick said in disbelief. Yes, assured Diamond Tiara, and you passed. Congratulations. But how is saying that I have tics a test?
Nyx asked, focusing her questioning gaze onto the grayish pink filly. There was a moment of pause from Diamond Tiara, who smiled weakly as she glanced anxiously at Silver Spoon.
Silver Spoon interrupted. We just wanted to make sure you actually cared about being covered in ticks. That way we would know whether or not you cared about being clean. Well, of course. What kind of pony would actually like being covered in ticks?
Nyx asked.
A pony that's like a real weirdo, Diamond Tiara answered, jumping back into the conversation. And obviously you're not a weirdo because you do care. Still, we are like sorry we made you cry. We just have to be sure you are a cool pony. And I am a cool pony? Nyx asked anxiously. Silver Spoon nodded. Totally cool, and that's why we wanted to be like friends with you. Really? Nyx asked with a grin, unable to hide her enthusiasm at having more friends. Oh yeah, we can be like total BFFs, Silver Spoon assured eagerly. What's that? Nyx asked as she began to walk with the other two fillies. BFFs, best friends forever, Diamond Tiara explained. Oh, and just so you know, black is so totally cool. It is? Like, coolest color ever. It makes you unique, even if you don't have a cutie mark yet, Silver Spoon assured. Totally cool. Well, thanks. I'm glad we can be friends, Nyx said, smiling. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon smiled as well, winking at each other behind Nyx's back before snickering. What's so funny? Oh, nothing. Just thinking of a joke Silver Spoon told me. Now let's go get those sweets. Really? Nyx asked in disbelief as she sat with Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara just outside of Sugar Cube Corner, the three eating their snacks. Nyx levitated the food to her mouth, doing her best to remember all the lessons on being a proper mare Rarity had taught her, since Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon seemed to be the kind of fillies to care. Oh, yes. The Everfree Forest is really amazing once you go deep enough inside, Diamond Tiara reassured Nyx. She and Silver Spoon had just spent the last half hour telling Nyx that while the Everfree Forest was scary on the outside, it was really an amazing place. Once you traveled far enough inside, Diamond Tiara said it became a beautiful place with all sorts of gentle animals and babbling brooks and huge fields of flowers. To Nyx, it sounded like the best place ever. But I've been in the Everfree Forest with Twilight and I never saw anything like that. You must not have gone deep enough, Silver Spoon answered quickly, brushing off Nyx's comment. Still, you don't know what you're missing. It's like so beautiful, Diamond Tiara said before perking up with a smile. Hey, we should all go together. I don't know, Nyx said nervously. I've been in there and it's really scary. And Twilight told me never to go back in there because of all the monsters. Look, there's nothing to be afraid of. The main path is like enchanted or something. You stay on it and the monsters will leave you alone. Oh, well, that's good, but... Nyx hesitantly rubbed her forelegs together. Twilight's expecting me back at the library. Oh, don't worry. Silver Spoon and I will go tell her where we're going, Diamond replied, reaching into her saddlebags and pulling out a map. on which she had drawn a dotted red line. Just follow this map with the path marked, and you'll get to the really beautiful part of the Everfree Forest. We'll be right behind you. Nyx eyed the pair for a second, then glanced down at the map, biting her lower lip. Still, when she looked up and saw the very gentle and excited looks on Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, she couldn't help but smile. Nyx picked up the map with her magic and stuck it into her saddlebags. She then took out some of the bits Twilight had given her. Well, okay, I'll see you there. But please remember to take Twilight a sugar cookie when you go tell her. Of course, Silver Spoon said, taking the bits and standing up from the table. I'll go buy the cookie right now. Yeah, we'll go tell Twilight. You just go on ahead, BFF. Nyx nodded, jumping down from the table and trotting off in the direction of the forest. Diamond Tiara smiled, watching the black filly until she had rounded a corner before bursting out in laughter. Diamond Tiara laughed until Silver Spoon came back out of Sugar Cube Corner carrying 2 freshly purchased cookies. Oh, that was too easy. Silver Spoon nodded, offering one of the cookies to Diamond Tiara. Yeah, and we got free cookies out of the deal. This, Silver Spoon, was our best prank ever. Totally, the Grey Earth Pony replied, the pair high-hoofing before digging into their ill-gotten cookies. Twilight trotted through the streets of Ponyville as she anxiously looked around. She hadn't seen Nyx in 2 hours, and she was starting to worry. She hadn't been able to find the young Alicorn or the 2 fillies that had come to play with her. For the moment, however, she was willing to believe that they had just gotten caught up in playing and lost track of time. The unicorn trotted off to the market and looked around, but saw no sign of Nyx. She did, however, catch sight of Applejack. The farm pony was tending her market stand while keeping an eye on Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle, who were trying to balance on top of each other. It was another attempt in getting their cutie marks, but Twilight didn't have time to try and figure it out. Hey, Applejack. Hey there, Sugar Cube. What can I do you for? Want some Red Delicious Gala or maybe some Granny Smith apples? Applejack, you haven't seen Nyx, have you? Applejack cocked her head to the side. Nyx? Why, no, I haven't. Is she missing? I don't know. The unicorn fretted as she glanced about. 2 fillies from her class came by to see if she could play, but that was 2 hours ago, and I'm starting to worry. Applejack chuckled, her eyes drifting over to Apple Bloom for a moment. Oh, Twilight, I'm sure you got nothing to worry about yourself. You know fillies that age. They're probably just off playing. I know, but it's been 2 hours. What 2 fillies came to play with Nyx? Apple Bloom asked as she and her friends walked up to the 2 mares, having overheard the conversation. I don't know their names. One was gray with a spoon cutie mark and glasses. The other has a swirled mane and a tiara. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon? Nyx went to play with them? Apple Bloom asked, her voice carrying undertones of concern. Yes. Is that bad? Twilight asked, her concerns increasing from the filly's tone. Twilight, those 2 are bullies. Don't you remember how they made fun of me and called me a blank flank at Diamond Tiara's quinceañera? Twilight's eyes narrowed as she remembered that day and the 2 fillies who had teased Apple Bloom. She hadn't recognized them when they came to play with Nyx because they didn't have their party dresses on. Girls, Applejack began, getting the attention of the 3 fillies. I reckon you better help Twilight find those 2. You know where they like to hang out? I know where Diamond Tiara lives. Her dad owns the jewelry shop here in town, Sweetie Belle claimed. My big sister Rarity is good friends with her father. Whenever I go over to the shop with her, I usually see Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon doing homework this time of day.
Take me there, Twilight ordered. The three fillies abruptly saluted the unicorn, accepting her command before galloping off, Twilight following a few steps behind. Nyx shakily took out the map Diamond Tiara had given her, looking it over before looking up at the dark, foreboding path ahead. She didn't know how far along the path she was, but the line on the paper said she had to keep going. The line crossed the river, and Nyx froze, and Nyx could hear the babbling of the stream just ahead of her. Still, after she had rounded a corner, Nyx froze up, her eyes focusing on a large purple serpent that was splashing around in the water. Ducking behind a tree, Nyx watched as the purple sea serpent with strangely well-styled orange hair ate his lunch, some rough gemstones he had gathered from the riverbed. Nyx wasn't certain the serpent wouldn't turn down his gemstones to eat a little pony, so she decided to stay hidden and wait till he had left. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon weren't at the jewelry store, and Twilight was officially starting to panic. The Cutie Mark Crusaders had split up, each going to fetch help. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle ran to get their big sisters, while Scootaloo used her scooter to quickly race out of Ponyville to where Rainbow Dash was practicing tricks. That left Twilight to continue to run around Ponyville, trying to find the two fillies who had last been with Nyx. She began asking any pony she came across, growing more frantic as more time passed. Where were they? Where was Nyx? Twilight! The unicorn turned skyward, seeing Rainbow Dash circling above her. I've found them! This way! With that, the Pegasus banked, flying off to another part of Ponyville. Twilight galloped as fast as her hooves could carry her. It was a few blocks of running, but after rounding a corner, Twilight saw Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. How do you want to do this? Rainbow Dash asked. Go find the others and have them meet in the town square, just in case we have to go and try to find Nyx. I'll deal with these two. You got it, Rainbow Dash said as she sped off to gather all the others. Twilight watched her friend leave for a moment before turning her eyes on the park bench, glowering as she approached the two fillies. Hey, you two! Twilight snapped, making the two fillies jump. Still, the shock was short-lived as the pair's expression shifted to annoyance and disinterest. Oh, look, Silver Spoon. It's the town librarian. What? Trying to find ponies that have overdue books? Diamond Tiara teased. Where is Nyx? Who's that? We don't know a Nyx, do we, Silver Spoon? Doesn't ring a bell, Silver Spoon said behind a giggle. Diamond Tiara would have joined in the giggle, but the laughter died in her chest as her eyes fell on Twilight's sparkle. While such reports of such things are rare, exceptionally magically inclined unicorns were said to be able to perform a rage shift where their anger feeds into their magic and causes a physical change to their bodies. Twilight experienced one such rage shift while she was trying to understand Pinky's sixth sense, and today would be the second such occurrence. Mane and tail set ablaze by her rage-driven magic, eyes glowing red, and her coat a very bright and angry white. Twilight stared down at Diamond Tiara like she was a pony of the apocalypse. Unless you want me to turn you into a cactus, you will tell me where Nyx is. Right now. She's in the Everfree Forest, Diamond Tiara squeaked out in fear. We told her that the forest is really nice if you go deep enough, and gave her a map. She left from Sugar Cube Corner, and that's the last we saw of her. Twilight's rage shift ended, her mane, tail, and coat returning to normal as her eyes narrowed to pinpoints. Without another word, Twilight spun on her hooves and galloped towards the center of Ponyville, where Rainbow Dash would be gathering her friends. It would be getting dark soon, and the Everfree Forest only got more dangerous. In the dark, Nyx trembled, just barely keeping herself moving without crying. If only so she didn't attract the attention of any monsters. It had gotten dark, and the forest had gotten very, very scary. The little filly looked around the path anxiously, looking at the many long shadows, seeing things that may or may not have been there. It was only some miracle that the moon was 3/4 full, providing plenty of light to see the path ahead. Nyx had given up on trying to find the nice part of the forest. Now all she wanted to do was get back to Ponyville, but she lost her map. Something had startled her, a rustling in the bushes, and when she ran, she left the map behind. Now she was wandering around aimlessly, trying to recognize some landmark. She tried to follow the paths that were familiar. Ones she thought looked like parts of the forest she had seen before. Still, she hadn't even crossed the river again. The one landmark Nyx was desperately hoping to see, even if the sea serpent had returned. Following a bend in the path, Nyx came to a stop, as her eyes fell on aged and worn stone. A creaky rope bridge hang over a deep expanse, shifting gently from side to side. On the far side were the ruins of an ancient castle, long forgotten and partially overtaken by the ever-free forest. It was something Nyx knew she hadn't passed by on her way into the forest, and yet it was strangely familiar. Curiosity starting to replace fear, Nyx carefully stepped out onto the bridge, crossing the expanse. Thankfully, none of the wooden planks gave way, so Nyx was able to cross to the other side without incident. Still, as the filly looked up at the long-forgotten castle, something began to bubble up in her mind. Nyx tried to force whatever it was away, tried to clear her head, but the blurry images and voice persisted, playing out inside her head.
Oh, my beloved subjects. It's been so long since I've seen your precious little sun-loving faces. What did you do with our princess? Whoa there, Nearly. Why, am I not royal enough for you? Don't you know who I am? Ooh, more guessing games. Hokey Smokes. How about Queen Meanie? No, Black Snooty. Does my crown no longer count now that I've been imprisoned for 1,000 years? Did you not recall the legend? Did you not see the signs? I did, and I know who you are. You're the Mare in the Moon. Nightmare Moon. Well. Some pony who remembers me. Then you also know why I'm here. You're here to remember this day, little ponies, for it was your last. From this moment forth, the night will last forever. Ah!
Nyx shook her head, finally managing to banish the blurred thoughts that had overtaken her. She had recognized some of the voices. She had heard Twilight, but there was a voice she shouldn't have recognized but did. The voice of the older mare, the one who laughed in the end. It was a voice that Nyx felt she kind of remembered, but she couldn't recall who it belonged to. Putting the strange occurrence out of her mind, the little filly began to climb the steps to the castle. She didn't know why, but she had to see inside, no matter how scary the ever-free forest was. It was as if the castle was calling out to her. She climbed steps, navigated old hallways, and eventually entered one remaining tower. There were no defining features to the room, which had suffered under the passage of time, but Nyx recognized that it was the palace's throne room, and it felt like she had been there before. The little filly stepped into the center of the room, looking up at the broken glass windows at the far end. She then winced in pain, images bursting to the front of her mind. These were far more aggressive than the images from before, and they were much clearer. They would not be ignored, shoving all other thoughts out of Nix's mind as they demanded attention. Nix. She realized they were memories, that she could remember standing at the far end of the room, looking down across it. She was looking down at a small purple unicorn. A unicorn she knew. Twilight.
You little fool! Thinking you could defeat me? Now you will never see your princess or your son. The night will last forever!
Nix could remember herself saying those words. She could remember thinking them. But even worse, she could remember the feelings behind those thoughts. She wanted to hurt Twilight, to punish the unicorn for trying to thwart her. She was thinking about banishing her, imprisoning her, even torturing her. Nix struggled against the memory. No, she didn't want to hurt Twilight. Twilight was the kindest pony she knew. It was Twilight who took care of her, who taught her, who read her to sleep at night with storybooks. It was Twilight who had found her in the forest. She didn't want to hurt Twilight. Dark shadows shifted around the room. Dispelled magic that had lain dormant, being awoken by Nix's presence. Trails of indigo smoke began to creep towards Nix, and as the magic began to seep into her, the memory continued despite how much Nix wanted it to stop. She saw Twilight with her friends, saw Twilight giving a long speech about elements, and then there was a bright light. A light so bright that it hurt to look at, that she had to shield herself from it with her wing. And then there was a rainbow, but not a nice pretty rainbow. No, the rainbow lunged at her like an angry snake, encircling her. It burned. It was burning her away, tearing her away from something else. It was like a savage animal with razor-sharp claws, tearing her to ribbons despite her cries. Nix collapsed on the floor of the castle, panting heavily as the memory finally relented. Despite the cool feel of the castle stone floor, the filly could still feel the burning pain of the rainbow, how it had cut and torn at her. Other thoughts began to bubble to the surface as more and more of the indigo smoke began to draw in from the room and feed into Nix. The thoughts were desires, hateful desires, desires to hurt ponies, to make them pay, memories of being scorned and ignored, memories of jealousy and anguish. Amongst these, a few began to stand out. Thoughts that mingled with Nix's latest memories of her friends, of Twilight. They began to poison those memories, filling them with hatred. She wanted to hurt Twilight, to make her suffer, to torture her. These were the thoughts that Nix didn't want to have. The little filly clapping her hooves against the side of her head as she called out to the silence.
No! I don't want to hurt Twilight. She takes care of me. She teaches me things. She lets me go to school. I don't want to hurt her.
Yet the thoughts continued relentlessly. Thoughts of how she would hurt Twilight, how she would torture her, snap off her horn, keep her locked into a dungeon, and horrible thoughts that had started to make Nix physically ill.
No!
Nix cried to the silence.
I don't want to hurt Twilight. I don't want to.
The thoughts were reaching a boil as Nix tried to push them away more rows in their place. Thoughts of how she'd hurt Twilight's friends to make the unicorn suffer, how she'd go after Twilight's family, all the ways she could break Unicorn's spirit.
No, 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 no!
With that final scream, something sparked to life inside Nix. The little filly alicorn's eyes glowing white. The creeping tendrils of indigo smoke suddenly shifted, swirling faster and faster as they were sucked down into the filly like water into a whirlpool. At the same time, the dark desires began to fade, ebbing away and leaving as Nix floated up into the air. With the trances of the indigo cloud were gone, Nyx's horn sparkled, a crack of lightning lancing up from her horn and into the sky with a thunderous boom. Celestia bolted up in bed and turned her eyes to the window, through which she could see Ponyville and the Everfree Forest. Her breathing was still as she stretched out her magic and senses. For a moment it felt like... No, that was impossible. She could sense Luna in the castle, in the main hall. But this presence... It was short-lived, but she had sensed her presence. A presence the Sun Princess never hoped to sense again. In another part of Canterlot, a dark blue unicorn with turquoise eyes, who was sitting in his study, also looked out his window. His eyes remained focused on the window for a time, looking beyond it to the distant Everfree Forest. He shut the book he had been reading, a complex spell book on theoretical resurrection magic. The figure quickly moved to the door of his study, opening it and calling out to the hallways of a stately manner. "Proper etiquette!" "You called, sir?" the butler pony replied, quickly zipping up. He was an all-white unicorn, with a collar and tie around his neck and a monocle over his right eye. His eyes turquoise as well. "Have messages sent to Miss Greygale, Miss Nightwind, and Mr. Stonewall. I need to speak to them right away. This evening, if possible." "Of course, sir. I will have them summoned immediately." Twilight cried out, tripping over her own hooves as she landed on a heap on the side of the path. She and her friends had been racing through the Everfree Forest when a bolt of lightning launched itself up into the sky. Twilight had been in the lead, galloping as quickly as her legs would carry her when she heard the thunder. It had made her jump, causing her to tumble head over hooves before crashing hard into the ground. Rarity and Fluttershy quickly galloped up to assist Twilight while the others were transfixed skyward, where they had just seen the bolt of magic. "Whoa! Did you see that?" Dash asked, the Pegasus pointing skyward. Sure did, Sugar Cube. Where do you reckon it came from?" "Oh, the Everfree Forest," Pinkie Pie chirped. "Well, no duh, Pinkie Pie," Rainbow Dash pointed out. "We're kind of in the Everfree Forest." "Of course, silly. That's how I knew that lightning bolt came from here." Dash slapped a hoof to her forehead while Twilight struggled to her hooves. "Twilight, dear, you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine. I just tripped," Twilight assured, pushing her friend away as her horn glowed. The group had stopped just momentarily at the library before heading into the forest, getting a compass and a map. Pinkie Pie had volunteered to carry the map in her curly mane, while the compass hung from Twilight's neck by a thin piece of string. The unicorn drew both items out, levitating them in the air as she looked skyward. "Okay," Twilight began after taking a breath to calm herself. "Where was that lightning bolt again?" "Right over there," Pinkie Pie answered, pointing at the sky with her hooves. Twilight positioned herself by Pinkie Pie, holding up the compass as she turned the map over in the air. "Okay, using the mountains as reference, we're about here, and if we're here and the lightning bolt was there, and the lightning bolt came from..." Twilight fell silent, staring at the map. She double-checked her rough measurements and guesses, but in the pit of her stomach, she knew she was right. I know where Nyx is," Twilight said, dropping the map and compass in the mud. "And I need to get to her now." "But Sugar Cube, how do you..." Applejack began to ask, only to be cut off as a bright light enveloped Twilight, the unicorn disappearing as she teleported away. Twilight reappeared, looking around the room she had not been in since the last summer sun celebration. The throne room in the ancient castle of the Royal Pony Sisters, where she and her friends had defeated Nightmare Moon. The room was just as Twilight remembered it, except for a single small detail. Nyx was lying in the center of the room, allowing Twilight to have a brief moment of relief before a powerful fear ripped her chest. Nyx's normal mane and tail were gone, replaced with flowing masses of star-dotted magic. The filly now looked much more like Nightmare Moon, lacking only the armor, eyeshadow, and cutie mark. This was her fears made real. With that mane and tail, could she deny the truth any longer? Could she honestly believe that the cultist spell had not accomplished its intended purpose? Nyx was young. With the magical mane and tail, there was no denying that she was crying. Nyx's wails filled Twilight's ears, derailing her train of thought. She was bawling her eyes out, her cries filling the room. For a moment, Twilight had to catch herself, already having taken a few steps forward. She wanted to comfort Nyx, to tell her everything was okay. She was terrified, more so than the night Twilight had found her. Twilight couldn't dismiss Nyx's resemblance to Nightmare Moon, especially now that the filly had the mane and the tail the mare in the moon was infamous for. Yet, would Nightmare Moon be crying like that? Would she be wailing so loudly? Unable to bear it anymore, Twilight inched towards Nyx. When she was close enough, she reached out and gave Nyx a gentle touch. The filly spun her head around, a frightened look in her eyes. That fear, however, died almost immediately, as Nyx scrambled to her hooves and pressed herself against Twilight, embracing the purple unicorn.
Twilight! Nyx bawled. Shh. It's okay. It's okay.
Twilight reassured, cautiously wrapping her hooves around Nyx as the filly trembled and buried her head in Twilight's neck.
I'm sorry, please don't hate me, please, I don't want to hurt you.
Nyx wailed, her voice muffled. Twilight's heart skipped a beat as she fought the urge to pull away.
Hurt me? When did you want to? I don't know, the alicorn filly sobbed miserably. I came here and then, and I remember looking down on you. We were both here, and you looked so scared, and I was happy to see you scared, and I wanted to hurt you because you tried to stop me from doing something, but I don't want to hurt you, Twilight. Please don't hate me. I don't want to hurt you. Twilight felt a tension in her chest, a physical manifestation of the conflict going on in her mind. It was like the night she found Nyx. She saw the resemblance the filly had with Nightmare Moon. Yet, she saw Nyx's fear of how utterly terrified the filly was at the time. No, Nyx wasn't only scared, she was apologizing. Apologizing for things that Nightmare Moon had done, had thought, had felt. It was another sign that worried Twilight, because if Nyx had memories from Nightmare Moon, it was almost conclusive evidence that the two are one and the same. Yet, as Twilight looked at the young filly crying into her neck, she just couldn't see Nightmare Moon. The alicorn Twilight had thought just wouldn't be crying like this. Nyx just wasn't the same. Nyx loved the sun, had friends, and was curious about the world. These were traits that didn't fit Nightmare Moon at all. No, she knew Nyx. The filly had been living with her for weeks, and Twilight had tried to keep herself distant. She didn't believe Nyx was Nightmare Moon before, but at the same time, she had tried not to become attached. Yet, she was reading stories to Nyx at bedtime, helping the filly with schoolwork. She had run into the Everfree Forest in the middle of the night to find Nyx. Twilight wasn't sure what Nyx was or how much, if anything, she shared with Nightmare Moon beyond the physical similarities. She did, however, know one thing.
Nix was crying, terrified of her own memories, terrified of the fact that at some point she had wanted to hurt some pony. Twilight just couldn't ignore Nix's suffering.
I know you don't.
Twilight finally comforted, hooking a leg around Nix as she embraced the filly.
It's okay. I know you don't want to hurt me.
Twilight's words, however, were not enough to comfort Nix. She continued to cry, begging Twilight's forgiveness. Again and again, Twilight said it was okay, but she didn't force Nix to stop. The filly needed to cry, to get it all out. She remembered something terrible, something she couldn't understand, and it scared her. Yes, there was a chance Nix was Nightmare Moon, and there was still a small chance the filly just looked like the mare in the moon. All that, however, didn't matter at the moment. What mattered was that she needed to comfort Nix, assure the filly that everything was okay, and that she didn't hate her. She just had to be there, to be a comforting adult for a filly who was terrified of her own memories.